I could read Ray Bradbury all day. I mean, if you told me that the guy spent a whole week on each one of his sentences, I'd probably believe you. But of the 9 Bradbury books I've read, some are better than others. So it's time to rank the reads. Let's see which ones I'm giving rave reviews and which ones should be Bradburied and forgotten as I rank them from worst to first. Coming in at my least favorite Ray Bradbury book is Zen in the Art of Writing. Ray Bradbury is a one-of-a-kind writer, but if this book is any indication, he's a subpar teacher. As a marketing copywriter and someone who occasionally writes short stories myself, I thought Ray Bradbury would provide some interesting ideas about the creative process. And I was bummed to find out that this boring collection of essays doesn't include many real techniques. It was focused more on encouraging you to start writing, and then doing some self-back-patting on Bradbury's own career and writing skills. Spare yourself the time and just listen to this handful of tips that I got from this book. The first tip is practice makes perfect. Obviously, Bradbury is passionate about writing. I mean, it's in his DNA. He basically says to write as often as you can. And if you're truly passionate about writing, this shouldn't be a chore. Second, use your life experiences to fuel your creativity in writing. Think about how you felt in certain instances, or what made a big impact on you. Then consider how those strong emotions or meaningful events can improve your stories. Third, get into a flow and don't stop to edit or second guess your writing. This is a common recommendation nowadays. You give yourself 5 minutes and just write without striving for perfection in your first draft. There might be nuggets of gold amongst all the crap. And the last writing tip that I got out of this book is to observe and absorb as much as possible. Paying attention to and thinking about the world around us is important for writers, but Bradbury's incredible memory is difficult to replicate. It feels like something you either have or you don't. Although jotting down notes certainly helps if you want to revisit things from your past. Again, if you want a bit of inspiration and some anecdotes about Bradbury and his stories, this is a fine book, but it doesn't have the insightful, practical advice I thought would be included. At number 8 on my list is Dandelion Wine. Ray Bradbury has a soft spot in his heart for his childhood. A really soft spot. And that nostalgia is on full display with this novel, which, like a couple of others on this list, is a collection of short stories loosely tied together by the fictional small town of Greentown, Illinois, and the 12-year-old protagonist Douglas Spaulding. Because of its construction, the book isn't 100% cohesive. It jumps around while romanticizing small-town life in an overly sappy way. The setting is the summer of 1928, as Douglas begins to grow from childhood into adulthood. Because of this crossroads, several of the stories look at the world with a sense of wonder, while others deal with topics like aging and death. Also, I don't know if this was done on purpose or not, but a few of the adult characters in the book seem a little Disney-ish to me. They don't feel realistic. They act like how a kid would picture them acting. Like I said, maybe that was all done on purpose, but it's just kind of strange. If you want a feel-good story that captures the magic of the good old days, this book is fine, but it didn't have enough depth or interesting characters to hook me. Next on my list is Farewell Summer. So Dandelion Wine was published in 1957, and its sequel, Farewell Summer, was published in 2006. It was also the last Bradbury book published during his lifetime. Yet again, it focuses on Douglas Spaulding and his buddies. And this time they're taking part in a pseudo-war against the elderly residents of the town, stealing and breaking little things in these battles. It's a literal fight against the looming threat of aging and mortality. That's also why so much of the imagery has to do with the passage of time, whether it's clocks, mirrors, or birthdays. Farewell Summer picks up right where Dandelion Wine left off, as Doug starts discovering more about himself and becoming more aware of his manhood. I think this continuation is why I like it a tad more than Dandelion Wine. It doesn't seem to backtrack in any way, but keeps the nostalgic, whimsical story going. Up next is The Halloween Tree. Bradbury clearly likes having a younger group of boys as the heroes of his stories, as this fall favorite follows several friends who go trick-or-treating to a haunted house on Halloween, only to have their pal Pipkin mysteriously whisked away by a dark figure. As they try to save their missing buddy, they're led back in time to see the roots of certain Halloween elements by the mystifying Mr. Moundshroud. They visit ancient Egypt for a funeral, Mexico for a Dia de los Muertos celebration, and Europe in the Middle Ages to see witches. In each place, Pipkin is somehow part of the setting, and each of the boys uncovers how their Halloween costume plays a part in the Halloween story. The vibe is magical yet malevolent, and I really think that Ray Bradbury used just about every word in the English language that has a sinister feel to it. And he uses them in unique ways, describing items and actions unlike any other author. It's like a book of sinister poetry. With the kids going on this adventure, but really never seeming at risk, the Halloween tree also feels like a dark episode of the Magic School Bus. It's like you're taking part in a field trip gone wrong. It's this juxtaposition of darkness and playfulness that makes the novel work so well. And at the same time, it perfectly captures the distinct spirit of Halloween. Next book I'm going to talk about is Something Wicked This Way Comes. Ray Bradbury is playing his hits again in this one, and I'm totally here for it. It's autumn again. It's Greentown, Illinois again. The main characters are two 13-year-old boys again. And again, Bradbury is looking at themes of friendship and the fear of aging. In this book, which, yes, is part of the Greentown trilogy, the lives of two young boys are turned upside down after a mysterious carnival comes to town. A battle between good and evil ensues in this coming-of-age story that also features a couple healthy scoops of friendship and nostalgia. It reminds me a bit of Neil Gaiman's The Ocean at the End of the Lane, with its undercurrent of creepy, enchanting, frightening feels. Even some of the main characters' names, Will Holloway, Jim Nightshade, and Mr. Dark, give off spooky vibes. And the book's antagonist, like I said, Mr. Dark, is similar in a lot of ways to the Halloween tree's Mr. Moundshroud. The difference is that this isn't a bunch of short stories sewn together, it's a complete dark fantasy novel. One that expanded from a short story into a full-length book, so the fabric of it stays more intact than of some of Bradbury's other works do. I think the level of horror is cranked up a notch too, and that's part of what makes this book feel more grown up. It's not just a fun romp, there seems to be real danger this time. Sure, some of the characters' dialogue doesn't seem realistic, and we all pretty much know what's coming with the plot since it was written 60 years ago, but it's a creepy carnival thrill ride that's worth the price of admission. As we get higher and higher on my Bradbury list, the next book is The Illustrated Man. Just as nearly every tattoo in real life tells a story, so does each tattoo on The Illustrated Man in this Bradbury classic. A former member of a carnival freak show, The Illustrated Man is covered in tattoos, each forming the basis for the 18 short stories in this collection. Because the stories come in a variety of styles and messages, they only barely fit together, with this device of The Illustrated Man helping them seem somewhat related. And the overall tone of these stories is mysterious and terrifying. They deal with dreams and nightmares, consumerism, technology, morality, belonging, and so much more. Often they use a spacey or alien setting as the backdrop, although they could have been set in any number of different places without any real disruption to the themes Bradbury was talking about. Some of my favorites in this book include classics like The Veldt, The Rocket Man, Marionettes Inc., The Fox in the Forest, and The Long Rain. Of course, there are a couple of below average ones in here too. I mean, they can't all be winners. That's partially why this isn't higher up my list. The stories are a bit hit and miss and aren't as cohesive as some of his other works. Plus, these are only some of his best from the late 40s and early 50s. He didn't have a huge catalog to choose from at that point. Coming in at number 3 and grabbing the bronze medal for my Bradbury novels is Fahrenheit 451. Arguably Bradbury's most well-known book, this sci-fi classic takes place in a dystopian future where the job of a fireman is to burn books. The main character, Guy Montag, is a fireman who begins to question his job description and the dangers that books actually pose. Eventually, he starts contemplating the value of thought-provoking versus mindless content. Fahrenheit 451 is about the results of censorship and the importance of questioning those in authority and the reasoning behind the things we do. This book's message about content might be even more relevant today than when it was published in 1953 because of how easy it is to lazily scroll through social media, binge shows, and stare at our phone rather than talk to people in social settings. These are all things I'm guilty of and trying to improve at. It's also a book that speaks to the heart of book lovers like me and you. So it's no wonder that I enjoy how it shines a spotlight on the value of reading and the power of deep reasoning. And that strong, meaningful message is why Fahrenheit 451 makes it to number 3 on my list. At number 2, and taking the silver medal, is The Martian Chronicles. This is a patchwork Ray Bradbury book, meaning he had a bunch of short stories that kind of made sense together, so he added a few bits and pieces to give this book a complementary feel. And as the title suggests, this collection of somewhat connected sci-fi short stories all revolve around the colonization of Mars. Some are poignant, some are funny, some are disturbing, but they're all must-reads for science fiction junkies. There are stories with social commentary about racism, predictions about futuristic devices that did come true, and clear inspiration from the pages of history, like the European colonists' impact on North and South America. However, some of the material does seem dated at times. It's sort of like binging Twilight Zone episodes. The questions posed and themes explored are still relevant, but many of the speculative details and technology are outdated. That's also another point to make. The Martian Chronicles isn't hard sci-fi. Basically, Bradbury just chose Mars as a setting for story ideas he had. Since many of these were written around the mid-20th century, the focus was mostly on amusing readers with page-turning ideas and awe-inspiring scenes. Realism and scientific terminology weren't a major part of Bradbury's sci-fi short stories then. And one last thing about the Martian Chronicles, the stories just kind of end for the most part. When you finish one, it doesn't seem necessarily neatly wrapped up with a pretty bow. The purpose was to present an interesting, entertaining story. So don't expect all of your questions about the story to be answered or everything to be fully resolved. The stories aren't crystal clear in that way. And coming in at number 1 on my Bradbury list, snagging the gold medal, is Bradbury stories. If there's one thing I've realized as I've been going through this exercise at looking at the Ray Bradbury books I've read, it's that I love his short stories. Don't get me wrong, his long-form novels are awesome, but no one writes short stories, especially sci-fi short stories like R.B. And while the ones in the Martian Chronicles are amazing, the sheer amount in this volume is what pushes Bradbury stories into my top spot. There are 100 gems here, spanning decades of his writing and showcasing Bradbury's impressive range. While it's a fantastic read from start to finish, it's also like a 10-season TV show where you can just as easily pop into a random episode and enjoy it. In fact, I used to have this book on my nightstand, and whenever I needed to cleanse my reading palate, I'd flip it open to a random page and just enjoy. The stories in it can be thought-provoking, spooky, uplifting, poetic, funny, and everything in between. Reading the stories in this book is like getting a variety pack of your favorite snacks. They all have different flavors, but each one is delightful in its own way and worth savoring. I can't recommend this book of short stories enough. Even if you read only a handful of them before returning it to the library, your time will have been well spent. There you have it, the 9 Ray Bradbury books I read ranked from worst to first. Let me know in the comments which ones you've loved, hated, or hope to read soon. And if you've made it this far in the video, I hope you'll take the time to like and subscribe, giving me that rush of dopamine I desperately crave. Happy reading.